In his eponymous 2011 article, Professor Josh Brown explains the origins of the common phrase, "no homo, bro," a phrase that helps understand, quote, "the complexities in gender identification processes, along with the linguistic dexterity necessary for survival in certain sociocultural groups, and the uneasiness with sexual and gendered nonconformity," unquote. "I love you, bro, no homo," became a linguistic commonplace among young men as a means to express their affection for one another while maintaining rigid boundaries of heteronormative masculinity. White Western men, particularly those in the United States and Britain, rigidly police the boundaries of acceptable masculine performance, especially as regards emotional interactions between males. As Kimmel has noted, masculinity is more a performance for other men than it is one for women. Scholars and advocates like Katz have explained that when young men do not learn to express weaker emotions like love, tenderness, and fear, this creates the ideal conditions for such dangers as domestic violence, sometimes violent homophobia and transphobia, the perpetuation of rape culture, and significant negative impact on men's emotional and physical health. Carroll argues persuasively that studying popular culture artifacts gives scholars a window into the cultural mood of a given time, and Jeffords and Lotz both concur that popular culture is both generative and reflective. That is, popular culture artifacts are objects that hold meaning on their own and are reflections of the wider cultural moment in which they were created. Becker, in particular, has done extensive work on bromances and bromosexuals, examining same-sex, no-homo friendships on television. Others have considered this theme on the big screen, but today I'm going to focus on a single scene from a single franchise, the Ron Harry Locket Horcrux scene in the 7th installment of Harry Potter. I use this case to pursue the question, how does popular culture teach young, especially American males, to recognize, perform, and police proper masculine behavior? I suggest that while the Potter novels expand the definitions of acceptable masculine performance, the films reinforce traditional gender roles and contribute to the creation of yet another generation of American men who will find it difficult to express healthy emotions, especially in their close same-sex friendships. The Harry-Ron friendship in the Harry Potter series is of particular importance as a broad-bounded same-sex friendship. Ron is Harry's very first friend, and Harry's connection to Ron is extremely tight. Because Harry has no close personal relationships before age 11, Ron becomes a sort of hybrid brother, friend, and first romance for Harry. I can answer more about that during Q&A. In the 4th book, when Harry's made champion, they argue and they're no longer speaking. And so Harry's spending all of his time with Hermione. Harry notes that he, quote, liked Hermione very much, but she just wasn't the same as Ron, unquote. Then in the 2nd task, when the other 3 champions must rescue a little sister and 2 girlfriends respectively, Harry must rescue Ron. Additionally, the 2 boys don't even talk about liking girls until book 5 and 6, and we all know that boys don't just go live at age 15. And in the 7th book, after the reunion I will discuss below, we read it was, quote, only now that Ron was here again that Harry fully realized how much his absence had cost them, unquote. Many scholars, like Dr. Bell, who will be speaking later, have argued in detail that the trio, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, must be a trio for the story to function. The efficacy and well-being of the heroes breaks down when one of them is missing. The Harry-Ron friendship, outside the trio dynamics, though, is an important example of close same-sex friendship. There are moments in the books when Harry and Ron police their behavior around one another. After the climax of the 4th book, for example, Harry, quote, wished Ron would look away, unquote, while Harry has tears in his eyes after witnessing his classmate's murder. Most of the series, they are true teenage boys in how they interact, kind of awkward and definitely posturing for one another, even in situations where it might seem silly to be doing that. The adults are the ones who show physical same sex platonic affection. There are other male male hugs in the series, but those are between usually an adult and a mentee, like when Hagrid gives bear hugs to Harry or Ron, or between two adults, like when Sirius and Lupin hug in their reunion near the end of Prisoner of Azkaban. The rare moment of physical affection between young adult Harry and Ron in the Deathly Hallows is evidence of their maturation to adulthood and demonstrates that young straight males can show their affection for one another physically at important moments. We go now to the seventh book, where Harry and Hermione continue the Horcrux hunt after Ron has spazzed out and left. In his attempt to recover the Sword of Gryffindor, Harry dives into the forest pool, still wearing the Horcrux locket. Sensing danger, the locket attempts to strangle Harry. Just when all seems lost, someone pulls Harry out of the water. It's Ron. After Ron saves Harry from drowning, they open the locket, and the fragment of Voldemort's soul emerges and tortures Ron, who manages to find his inner strength and destroy the Horcrux. After his dramatic return and the climactic destruction of the Horcrux, Ron stands victorious with tears in his eyes. He drops to his knees shaking, and his best friend Harry comes to kneel down beside him, putting a hand gently on his friend's shoulder. Speaking words of comfort and apology, the two reconcile their friendship, and then...
"You've sort of made up for it tonight," said Harry. "Getting the sword, finishing off the Horcrux, saving my life." "That makes me sound a lot cooler than I was," Ron mumbled. "Stuff like that always sounds cooler than it really was," said Harry. "I've been trying to tell you that for years." Simultaneously, they walked forward and hugged, Harry gripping the still sopping back of Ron's jacket. "And now," said Harry as they broke apart, "all we've got to do is find the tent again."
In this scene, the importance of the reunion allows Harry and Ron to show their affection in a mutually initiated embrace. It's a physical manifestation of the very big feelings both are feeling in being reunited and defeating the Horcrux together. It's not romantic, it's not sappy. So why was it taken out of the film? Now, disclaimer, let me be very frank. I am a book snob. I struggle to see the films as an artistic reinterpretation that they are, rather than just poor adaptations of the canonical texts I've spent so much time studying. That said, much of my dissatisfaction with the films comes from the omissions and changes the filmmakers choose for their movie versions of Harry Potter. The omission of this moving and mature moment of physical contact in a male homosocial friendship, as it was written in the novel, however, does strike me as something far more than merely irritating. This same scene from Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 unfolds thus, and I apologize for the poor video quality. Viewers who watch this scene without having read the book would see a reunion facilitated by battle, and certainly would not see friendly physical affection. Note their body positions. Rather than Harry placing a gentle hand on his friend's shoulder and then the two young men hugging, the two flop on the ground about a yard apart, and Ron is leaning away from Harry. You've definitely heard of zones of personal space before, right? So there's public space, social distancing, where we are right now, ranging all the way down to the intimate space, which in the book scene, Harry and Ron immediately are in during their reunion. but which Moody says, and no, not Mad Eye Moody, quote, is reserved for people who genuinely care about each other, unquote. In the film scene, however, the two are in the personal zone, this yellow zone, so between these two, which is private still, but not intimate. The boys do not transgress the physical and metaphorical boundaries that keep males from touching. Now, this piece is still in its earliest stages, and I haven't done the digging I'd really like to do to try to get answers on why exactly these choices were made. But I think we can make some reasonable speculations and from there draw some reasonable conclusions. So, reasonable speculation number one. The American film company Warner Brothers was marketing their movies to a very different audience and for different reasons than the British novelist did the books. The gendered messages would be some of the first to change. French scholar Nicolas researched just how iron-fisted Warner Brothers has become on the Harry Potter franchise, so much so that one might suggest that it's not the same series as the author's original 7 novels anymore. Need some evidence that Warner Brothers makes some changes to appeal to their idealized broad film demographic? Let's take the changing race of Lavender Brown, who as a minor character was portrayed by Black actresses until she had a speaking role and would have to kiss one of the white leads and suddenly turned white. Or we could take the hyper-feminization and sexification of Hermione, which happened in the 3rd movie, incidentally, when the Harry Potter film series launched into the global box office smash it would become. Reasonable speculation number 2. The no homo bro culture is pervasive, reinforcing and reinforced by images of male homosocial relationships in popular culture. American and British popular culture does not model male-male physical affection in the way that, say, the French or the Italians do. Halberstam echoes the sentiments of many critical masculinity scholars in arguing that it's much easier to know what hegemonic masculinity isn't rather than what it is. And what it isn't is feminine. Kimmel argues that this stereotype drives the masculine performance of homophobia and transphobia, not, as one might assume, because a man hates gay men, but actually because that man fears that other men will think he's not masculine. And by projecting his own fears and insecurities into homophobic and transphobic speech, and into misogynistic speech, while he's with other men, a man performs a public assurance of his status as a real man. This rigid self-policing results in homosocial anxiety. In general, men do not have the same level of intimacy in their same-sex friendships as women do, and this shows in our popular culture. Now, this may be changing, and I think it is holla at you, Schitt's Creek, but at the time of the 7th Harry Potter movie and the 8th, many of the hugely popular models for warm homosocial relationships in popular culture just weren't around yet. Combining these two speculations, that hegemonic masculine behavior remains present in the no homo bro Western culture and popular culture, and that Warner Brothers aggressively pursued the $7.7 billion that it ultimately grossed off of Harry Potter, we can reasonably conclude that feeding viewers what they wanted or expected to see would bring in more viewers. In short, any suggestion that Harry and Ron were anything other than rigidly heterosexually normal would not have sold as many movie tickets. Oh, Lauren, this is just one scene, you're overreacting. Maybe. But there are other moments in the 2 Deathly Hallows films where Harry shares physical affection with his platonic friend Hermione, and where Ron shares romantic affection with his love Hermione, but where the boys don't do it. I'm referring here in particular to the moment when Harry tells his 2 best friends he's going to sacrifice himself to Voldemort, which is an invention of the movies. We could talk about that during Q&A. In that scene, Hermione throws herself tearfully into Harry's arms, but Ron and Harry just exchange a stern, meaningful look. And at the very end, before the flash forward, Each boy is holding Hermione's hand on the bridge, rather than Harry, the ostensible main character, being in the middle. The ways that Harry Potter has been adapted from book to movie and beyond, I think, is evidence of my point. In the Lego Harry Potter Years 5 through 7 Xbox 360 video game, one of my very favorites, the scene in question is present and is, however, even more hypermasculinized than the movie was. Let's take a look. It must be noted that every relationship in the game is made a little bit silly. So Hermione, for example, is regularly shoving Ron off her when he tries to give her a hug, or Ron is constantly eating. And while this scene certainly fits that mold of being a little silly, the posing and the celebration is even more different from the book than the movie is from the book. The characters are reduced to the heroic action they've just performed, rather than the moment of same-sex male friendship the scene represents in the books. In my previous work on variant masculinities in Harry Potter, I argued that part of the magic of the series is that it's an adolescent male who's written by someone who's not male or male identified. The male friendships in the series, siblings, friends, parents, mentors, offer a rich variety of maleness. Unlike other fantasy children's series where the authors maintain traditional gender roles, many of the men in Harry Potter cross traditional boundaries of proper masculinity. The movies, by contrast, reduce the different characters to much less rich, much less subtle gender performances, and the important teaching moments disappear. I suggest that this reduction reflects and reinforces the rigid boundaries of heteronormative hegemonic masculinity in America. Harry and Ron's hug in the Deathly Hallows is a minute moment in a very long series, but the moment models broader boundaries of acceptable male gender performance and interactions with other males. That the films cut this moment is, I contend, not possibly a coincidence or an empty aesthetic choice. In short, it's more important to sell young males action heroes than fully formed male role models. Thanks.